Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio with Sean Patrick Hazlett, and I'm broadcasting on YouTube and United Public Radio. So, welcome back, everyone. As you all can see, no guest this week, and I feel so much calmer because I'm not worried about people showing up on time and whatnot. Also, the intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. I don't want to ever forget that. I really enjoy listening to some of the tunes that Carl Casey puts out, and he, allows folks, YouTubers, to use them for free as long as they're mentioned. So he deserves full credit where credit is deserved. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about a few things, but the main event is how UFOs work. And I am borrowing, i.e., stealing heavily from a book by Paul Hill, which I skimmed today, like the entire book. So you let me know how I do, because it's like not studying for the final exam, and I'm just kind of winging it. So I'm going to focus on a few specific areas and then kind of take it from there with questions and everything else. Also, I'll probably cover a few other things that were in the news recently that I definitely want to talk about, i.e., the SF colonel who shot a Chechen outside his home near Fort Bragg. Now it's Fort Liberty in Kentucky, or in North Carolina. He was an SF colonel, and there was a Chechen who had a telephoto lens outside his home and was taking pictures of his children. So we'll get into that and kind of the implications of things like that. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and we can touch base. And also, many of you have reached out to me, IM'd me and things like that on Twitter, Facebook, etc., and have asked questions about the current geopolitical environment. And the answers folks got have been a little bit more unfiltered and direct. And I'll filter them a little bit here because I don't want to alienate anybody, because with politics and things like that. But I will be able to go through some geopolitical predictions later. Anyway, let's see what the comments are doing before I get started and give some people some love. I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you for showing up again. We'll see. You can let me know at the so it's Cutchin. Joshua Cutchin was I think the last guest we had. And I have 3 more guests coming up. I think I have like one more slot. If not, I'll do another show like this because I'm going on vacation. There's be 2 shows that I had to pre-record. So Steve Mera is going to be on. It's already been pre-recorded. It's locked and loaded for next week. And then the 23rd is Daz Smith. And I'm doing some interesting stuff with Daz. Not only in that interview, but there's some stuff. I can't really talk about it yet, but we're running some experiments, and it's going to be pretty interesting results. And I'm also kind of doing something similar with Christopher Robinson. You'll find out on the main channel, Through a Glass Darkly. Let's see who else we got. Aloha, Knox Twilight. Good to see you. Yeah, he is. He's a good dude. And how you doing, Timepiece Adventures? Good to see you again. All right, let's get started. I know people are kind of listening to the radio, like, I don't see these people. I don't like, who are you talking to? What the heck? Oh, I didn't even bury the lead. Whitley Strieber's going to be on too, June 30th. So, and there's a lot of stuff I want to talk to him about. So, but I think it'll be a good episode. All right. So, the first thing that we should talk about is there's a book by Paul Hill called Unconventional Flying Objects. Or I'm probably butchering that, but let's just make sure I got that right. Yeah, I got that right. And the thing about Paul Hill is he worked for NASA. I think the large majority of his career, he was an aeronautical engineer. I think he's chief scientist at some point. So he was very grounded in the flight characteristics of different aircraft. He worked at NASA, kind of go all the way back, kind of. I don't even know if it was NASA at that point, but did a lot of this stuff stretching all the way back to the 50s. And I think what's even more important is he did not release this book when he was alive. It was released posthumously, and he did that for very obvious reasons. He did not want to draw heat upon himself and his family. He also didn't want it to interfere with his career. But a lot of this book is, and there's a lot of uh, there's equations in there, and and you can tell it's a very kind of aeronautical bias. So I didn't see Maxwell's equations or uh, you know the Poynting vector. I didn't see anything like that, but there is discussion about those sorts of areas. But I did see kind of standard mechanics equations that you would see in traditional uh, physics, right? So not the electricity and magnetism portion of physics, but force vectors and vector math, vector mechanics, all that stuff. So he comes at it from there, and what he does is he takes a lot of historical reports and observations, and then he systematically categorizes those observations into really good estimates of what velocities things would be traveling, why things might be shaped the way they are, common characteristics of UFOs, and he slowly builds things up. He also does a big section on subatomic particles and how they might uh, be involved, what their characteristics are. He talks about the different forces that these craft might have to exhibit in order to work. So there's a lot of detail in that, and it's if I were doing it right, I would have spent a week in trying to absorb it, and I probably would have had a pen and paper because it's. I think the last time I've done any serious physics or even reviewed electricity and magnetism circuits, all that stuff, would have been when I was in undergrad, and that was 26 years ago. So I had to do a lot of remembrance of like equations and things like that. Like they're still there, but they're not. I'm not sharp. So bear with me as I go through some of this good stuff. I should interview Dr. Michael. See, I should reach out. I just haven't. I have most of my interviews on the channel done until the end of June, and again, that's on purpose, so I can go on vacation without screwing the channel up and missing everything. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to focus on in this particular topic area is Paul Hill goes over kind of some of the most common shapes of UAPs, let's call it, just to get with the modern lingo. And the other thing too that a lot of these observations were colored by were the physics as it was, kind of 1991, right? I think he died in 1991 and the book was released in 1995. So there's not a lot of there's going to be some limitations, right? Although physicists have been so enamored with string theory, we probably haven't made that many advances, to be honest, in the 30 years since. But again, I'm not an expert, and any physicist that has a bone to pick with that is going to be right, and I'm going to be wrong. But that's just my kind of general impression. We're just very focused on the mathematics rather than some of the practical implications. And that doesn't include on the black side, like black projects and things like that, which we may be significantly further ahead than what we're seeing in the traditional space. Okay, so the first thing I'm just going to go through is just some of the observed things that, at least up until Paul Hill wrote this book, were seen. And the one thing that I want to note that is not in this book that I thought was rather interesting is of the first thing we're doing is just going to talk about the configurations of these various crafts, which is generally the shape, but the most obvious shape that is missing from this is a triangular craft. Don't know why, don't have an explanation for it. And that said, there is one thing that is different about a triangular craft that is not with the rest of these shapes. So the thing about a triangular craft is it kind of has bilateral symmetry, which means you can kind of fold it in half, but you can't really fold it in, if you rotate it, you can't really fold it in the same way without it kind of over and still make it overlap. Whereas all the shapes I'm about to describe have degrees of radial symmetry, which is kind of a circle you can fold any way and it's still going to be symmetric any way you kind of twist it. Okay. So in terms of the most common configurations, you have saucer shaped, right? So there's kind of three sort of general types that have been observed. There's a domed saucer. So just imagine a saucer and then kind of a parabolic dome. So if you took a parabola and then rotated it in 3 dimensions, you rotated it 360 degrees. That's kind of how it would look, right? Then you have your kind of lenticular saucer shape. So just imagine like, the shape of an eye with the lens, right? So just it's like a lens, right? It's shaped like a kind of tapered up and then down. And then same shape, but with a low dome. So just kind of combine the two prior shapes, where kind of a lenticular bottom and then that kind of parabolic dome at the top. Okay. So that's kind of the first three general configurations that have been reported all the way back since 1947. The next is a flat topped straw hat. So just think of like a trilby, right? So you just, or like even just like a cake, right? You have kind of that cake shape and then just a line underneath. Of course, that line is going to be circular, right? But just think of it as like a cake on a plate. Okay. The next shape is similar to that, only its its mirror is on the bottom. So think of like a straw hat, right? One of those straw hats, and then take another straw hat, line them up, and the it'll just be symmetrical, right? So you have the straw hat here, then you have an upside down straw hat here. They're combined. All right, and they call that the double hat. Then there's the conical hat, which looks a bit like the domed saucer, but it's more similar if you've seen like the helmets that Romans in the late Roman Republic would use, right? Where you just kind of have like this parabolic arc, but instead of a circular body, it's just kind of like flat. It's hard to describe. It's similar to the dome saucer, but it's a little bit different. But just think of it as a conical hat. So like the hat that you might see that the Viet Cong War, right? During the Vietnam War, except it's not as pointed. There's kind of some gradual rise to it. The next shape is just a general sphere. So just imagine a floating basketball orb sort of thing. The next is a Saturn shape. So the most famous incident of a Saturn shape. So imagine a sphere with a ring around it. The most commonly reported version of that would be the Japanese airline incident in 1986, where there's this giant craft that was spherical but had this Saturn shape. The next, let me just take a breather so people can kind of take that all in, and let's see who else is joined. Oh, I think we are just all up to date. So anyway, let me continue. All right, the next general shape is an ellipsoidal, kind of an egg or kind of a football shape hovering. So we all know what an American football looks like. so I'm not really going to describe it. And we all know what an egg looks like. So an example of a sighting with an egg would be, and now I'm totally blanking on who the person was, but it was in Indiana, and there was like an egg-shaped object that had landed in their yard. There were sightings of beings. Um, this was it was an incident that was reported in the book by Hopkins. It's called Intruders. So just think about that. Then there's the cylindrical giant cigar shaped. This is kind of the tic tac sort of look. You all know what that looks like. And this is one that I haven't heard that much of before. It's the dirigible, large dirigible. And just think of, if you think of like the early Christians in the time of the Roman Empire, where they had that px, that fish symbol. It kind of looks like that. So you just kind of have this main kind of lenticular body, and then attached to that at the edge is what would have been the fish fin, but it looks like a cylindrical attachment. Okay. Um, so that's kind of the general shapes that you typically see. In terms of size, the range is extreme, right? There's tons of different sizes. They can vary from something like 8 inches for a lenticular Foo fighter from World War II to well upwards of 1,000 feet in length for the giant cylindrical shapes. So if you just kind of quickly convert that, you're talking on the order of 1,000 feet, probably around several, 3 to 4 football fields, call it. Again, American football. And then the dirigible configurations range in the hundreds of feet, possibly larger. Saucers, spheres, and ellipsoidal configurations ordinarily range in the 1 to 30 meter size. And then the Saturn configuration is frequently in the 5 to 15 meter range. So I think the estimates of conical hat saucers have not really been made to suggest a range in size, but one was reliably estimated to be on the order of 200 meters in diameter. So, obviously there's no citation of any statistical studies that looked at this, and I don't, see any of the background. But in terms of colors, so in daylight, they range from highly burnished silver color to a dull aluminum appearance. Then flat bottom saucers are often darker underneath in a central circular area or in an annular ring near the rim. And then at night, there's typically 2 variations. So many of them carry running lights in a variety of patterns. Sometimes they blink. So it look like a Christmas tree or a theater marquee. And then there are solidly lighted craft in red, orange, amber, yellow, blue, or blue violet, and brilliant white. And then it's either in singular patterns or in combinations. And the solid colors often resemble neon lighting. Okay. So the next aspect that we can quickly cover is halos. So for the nighttime neon-like solid colors, it emanates from an envelope of air around the object like a halo rather than from the vehicle directly. The halo tends to obscure the vehicle, making the edges indistinct. Around saucers and Saturn-like craft, the halo is most concentrated near the rim. And then a unique cone of illuminating air is sometimes present below the saucer, giving it an ice cream cone-like appearance. Now, I think folks like Hal Puthoff have speculated that when you're kind of warping gravity fields and things like that, you have a blue shift aspect, which tends to take lower frequencies and upshift them, right? So that might be kind of what you're seeing from, the light spectrum, because you'd have, in order to stay above the ground, if you're messing with space-time, you would have to expand space-time beneath you to stay stable. But we'll get into more of that because Paul Hill does talk a little bit about it. The cylindrical objects are sometimes surrounded with a white cloud, right? So you'll get, kind of, back in the day, there was this great name, or moniker, Great Cloud Cigar, but it's less frequent, or at least was reported less frequently up to, call it, 1991. And then some craft have wakes. So dirigibles and cylindrical objects can carry plume-like wakes when accelerating or moving at extremely high speeds, which are gray to straw-colored in daylight, flame-colored at night, and they can move slowly without generating the plume. So you're talking, when they say slowly, we're talking 100 miles per hour. There's also some aspect of jitter. So, and that's kind of a measure of vibration. So they seem to vibrate heavily. And then if the object is also moving slowly, the object seems jerky or jittery. And it's difficult to really assess, according to Paul Hill, whether the jitter is an actual motion or an optical effect. So again, it's just listed here as an example. This is kind of actually quite interesting. So, we talked a lot about the visual representation of these craft. Actually, let me just answer some of these questions. Hachiko marks war. I don't know, but a trilby, if you look up a trilby, or just think of a straw hat, like those free straw hats that you get, that's what the hat shape would look like. Okay, and then good to see you, Woo Rider DG. And yeah, I saw what Carl Nell said at the SALT conference. It's kind of this more of the same, right? I don't think it was anything that much different. He just the the bottom line is, he said that 100% this phenomena is real. But I don't think that's inconsistent with anything that he said at Seoul. It was just for a much broader audience to consume. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's what they do. They jitter because it could be vibration. It just could be the effect of, the different space time, or warping space time. Who knows? But okay. So the interesting part here is, we talked a lot about the appearance, but we didn't talk about how these things feel. And one of the key aspects that you actually kind of don't hear that much, if at all, is reports of heat, right? So very few people have complained that I know. I don't know of any off the top of my head, that being near one of these UAPs is like being near a hot stove, right? Whereas if you stood next to the thruster of, like, not thruster, but the engine of, like, a F-30. I mean, if you stand near the engine of a M1 tank, right, it's extremely hot because it's got a turbine engine in it, right? And you can definitely feel it. In fact, in the winter, people will line up behind it, and it's still too hot, right? You could be in sub-zero, or sub-freezing temperatures, and it gets too hot after a while. But with these anomalous, unidentified anomalous objects, you don't really get people reporting that it's like being around a stove. Now, there is, some report of heat radiating from the infrared spectrum from these things, from their surfaces or from the surrounding halos and wakes, is missing. Except, there might be some mild sensations of warmth, but not a lot. So the implication of this, according to Paul Hill, is that it carries the strong implication that surface halos and wakes are not very hot, i.e., nothing is at like a red heat. All right, so now we've talked a little bit about visual stimuli and tactile stimuli. We haven't really talked about kind of some of the maneuvers. right? So the maneuvers, these things, you kind of have hovering at any altitude, and then falling leaf or UFO rock. The maneuver is similar to the motion of a coin falling in water. It most often occurs just before the UFO begins to hover. There's kind of a silver dollar wobble. So it's like giving a coin a slow spin on a flat surface. The motion occurs at the end of a rapid descent as the UFO initiates hovering. There's acute angle turns, right? So the UFO decelerates rapidly to a stop at the point of the turn and then accelerates rapidly in a new direction. So it requires the right angle turn is a special case of the acute angle turn. Sudden reversal of direction. So it's actually an extreme angle turn, 180 degrees. Bank and turn, so that's kind of moving more like the motions of conventional aircraft, right? Straightaway speed run, so the maneuver can be similar to the corresponding maneuver of conventional craft, but can be different in that it's just as apt to be vertical as horizontal or any angle in between, which is crazy. There's tilt to maneuver, and then UFOs tilt to perform all maneuvers. For example, they sit level to hover, and then tilt forward, and then move forward, tilt backward to stop, bank, turn, etc. So these are the various maneuvers that have been reported. So let's see. I'm just gonna. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So Carmel did say, I'm just taking a break from talking about UFO characteristics with non-human intelligence with our yeah, that's probably possible. Yep, sombrero shape would be kind of similar to the hat shape, um, or even the conical shape. Yeah, I mean, if most of them see these like triangular craft, that might be the case. Interesting. Yeah, that's possible. Okay. All right. So the next part of this is just performance. So how fast do these things move? So speeds to about 9,000 miles per hour, at least as of the printing of this book, have been measured at radar at 60,000 at 60,000 feet altitude at Goose Bay in Labrador, by radar near 18,000 feet near altitude over the Gulf of Mexico, and eyeballed between landmarks about this speed and 3,500 feet over Hampton Roads, Virginia. Acceleration, the literature on unconventional objects is filled with adjectives, um, but there's no, I mean, people have described it, but there's no numbers. So folks place a minimum value of um, of observed acceleration at the order of 100 times Earth's surface gravity on two occasions, once for spheres and once for a big dirigible. And then some reported sudden disappearances are quite likely cases of extreme acceleration, which may be beyond comprehension of the testifying witness and even the case investigator. So the major report pattern is either they disappear with lightning speed or incredible swiftness, or they move off slowly. Altitude, a half dozen sightings of unconventional objects by orbiting astronauts place operating altitudes at nearly 200 nautical miles. This figure would seem to qualify these objects as space-worthy, non-atmospheric phenomena, possibly spacecraft. Sound, so hum, buzz, or whine, these are characteristic sounds of the UFO at close quarters. The sound rises in both pitch and intensity seconds before and during takeoff from hovering or landed condition. Sometimes moving UFOs make a slight swish of air sound. At other times, the observer is greeted with absolute silence. And then unconventional objects seldom create a roar or boom, even when moving at supersonic speed. Solidity, and I think this has probably changed over time, but unconventional objects have solid surfaces. Characteristic is attested to by those who have touched them, rapped on them, and listened to the thud or the whine of ricocheting bullets from rifle and point blank pistol fire. Now, I think that's changed in recent times because folks have observed changes in medium, like transmedium travel. So, and sometimes there's been observations that they've passed through solid objects. So, even though it's not written in this book, there is some ability to phase shift or something similar. So, yeah, I think Woo Rider DG is saying 20G plus. Yeah, he's Paul Hill's talking 100G. Yeah, there's definitely someone else in the room, and I'm not happy about it. But there's nothing I can do while I'm on air. So, and you could probably hear like background noise that's not supposed to be there. But anyway. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the solidity. Landing, the main pattern is that UFOs let down retractable landing gear before landing. The gear leaves well defined prints in the contacted surface. Weight estimates indicate that modest sized unconventional objects weigh tons. And then saucers landing without. Actually, can you all just hold on for a moment? I'm about to lose my mind here. So, give me a second here. All right, thank you for your patience, everybody. All right, let's see what people have said. All right, good evening, Tessa. Yeah, had a insolent child who encroached upon my domain and had to be dealt with. All right. Hope that was quick. All right. So where were we? Okay. All right. So landing gear, we talked about weight. We're looking at kind of unconventional objects weighing in the tons. Okay. Let's see. All right. I'm going to skip a few things, but in terms of propulsion, these craft have, in general, no visible means of support. They have no externally visible engines, power plants, or other visible means of locomotion or propulsion. So, pattern wise, jet propulsion is seemingly absent. So, chemical propulsion, where you're pushing out, various, the combustion of various chemicals to, push you through air. And then in terms of, assuming these objects don't neutralize their inertial mass, The accelerations displayed place the propulsive forces at high values, so too high to be accounted for by any aerodynamic principle. All right, so analysis of direct physical evidence shows that these unconventional craft employ force fields. Invisible forces bend down or even break tree branches, bump or slow automobiles, sometimes spinning them out of control or even tipping them over, and stop people by force and even knock them down, among other observations. All right, and this is an important piece. Radiation, these objects are highly radioactive. Okay. They also typically have merging systems, so spheres and saucers have on numerous occasions seen to separate from the larger cylinders and dirigibles and reemerge with them. They can small objects move with the large object as a swarm or dart away at high speed in different directions, some swiftly returning. Occupants have been seen to disembark from and to reboard these objects. Sometimes one or two are seen. They seem to work as a team or crew. Let's see. In terms of interference, so these objects interrupt all electrical circuitry, burn out batteries, stop gasoline engines, but they don't affect diesel engines. I've never heard or seen that before, but that is very interesting. I wonder why. They don't affect diesel engines, but they will stop gasoline engines. Let's see if anybody has a theory for that. Let's see. Yeah, it's not Paul Stonehill. It's Paul Hill. Yeah. All right, I'm just going through some comments here. Yeah, I mean, they would have to have some sort of like inertial field dampeners or something like that on the inside of the craft so they don't get crushed. Ah, okay, there's the answer. So diesel are compression engines. They operate on compression. And heat-driven gasoline, it's heat-driven, it requires a spark. Oh, well, there you go. It doesn't require an electrical system. That's the answer. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Don. Okay. All right. Let's get back to it. All right. So, weaponry. So, I think almost the entirety of the weaponry observed are heat beams, paralytic beams, and force beams as tools and weapons, generally applied in moderation. Okay. They operate pretty much everywhere. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, I would say in general, those are the major characteristics of UFOs that have been observed in the literature. Okay. So, how do these things move? Right. So, I think, kind of how are they operating in the atmosphere to exhibit the characteristics that they have? Okay. So, bear with me while I get to this. Okay. Oops. I think I just skipped over a whole section. I did. Okay, so there's several different ways known to engineering, right, for the use of force to convey objects, to move objects. Okay, but regardless, there has to be a force that's operating on them, right? Aerospace engineers would call it thrust. And there's kind of six arbitrary categories that Paul Hill comes up with. All right. So the first is just kind of a direct mechanical action mechanism, right? So it's like a simple tool. So a wheel, a screw propeller, pulling with a tow bar, or pushing with a tow bar. All right. So just kind of standard brute force that a farmer might use. UFOs obviously don't do that. Okay. And then there's kind of pressures and pressure gradients in adjacent fluids. So that includes buoyancy, so Bernoulli's equation, that sort of stuff. Explosive forces, kind of the rocket equation that you would use to, well, no, it's not necessarily. I guess that's slightly different. But explosive forces, aerodynamic lift, and other fluid dynamic forces. Then you have rocketry, right? Which is the reaction force from the high speed ejection of propellants, right? So the rocket equation, that sort of stuff. Then there's high speed particle ejection. It could be classed under rocketry. However, rockets are heat engine, while particle acceleration is normally accomplished with force fields, and the speeds are characteristically much higher than rocket exhausts. Friction, right? Such forces, for obvious reasons, are generally adverse to propulsion, right? They're kind of more resistant forces. And then force field, right? So field gradient applies a force on all objects in a field which are affected by the field. And there's several versions of this, right? So you have an electric field, it applies a force on all electrically charged bodies. You have a magnetic field, it applies a force on all magnetic bodies, such as iron or nickel, bodies having a magnetic permeability other than that of air. The field moves relative to across a conductor of electricity, applies a voltage to the conductor. The current flows in the conductor. The magnetic field applies a force to it. The third possible option within force fields would be gravitational field, and that's just a centrally directed acceleration field. It applies an attractive force on all matter, like on everything, whether in the form of mass or energy. And then, according to someone named Joseph Weber, if negative mass exists, it is accelerated and attracted exactly as ordinary matter. Okay. And the fourth option is what he calls a repulsive field. And that's an outwardly directed acceleration field. It applies a repulsive force on all matter. And there's kind of two possibilities for that. So it's a field other than anti gravitational, as yet undiscovered, except as a UFO phenomena. So if you all watch the Rogan show, right, it would be, I think, what Terrence, what's his name? Would refer to as the ether, right? Now, people are saying the Michelson-Morley experiment back in the late 1800s kind of dispelled the notion that there's this kind of medium that everything is in called the ether, based on kind of the results of that experiment. There are people who are saying, "Oh, it was whatever." I'm not going to get into that, but let's say there's some medium that we just are unaware of. It's in some invisible force that has hitherto been as yet undiscovered, and it makes use of whatever that field is. The second kind of repulsive force field example would be negative gravity. A field, the same of that which presumably emanates from negative gravitational mass, i.e., an anti-gravitational field. And again, according to this gentleman Weber, it is still an unsettled question as to whether antiparticles have negative gravitational mass. This is, would have been written no later than 1991. So, and I haven't followed any recent papers in anything having to do with what's going on at CERN and things like that. So that notion might be completely irrelevant. I don't know. Okay. But it's saying they can't be tested by a gravitational field as they will be attracted whether positive or negative. Negative mass and anti-gravity are not inconsistent with metric gravitational field theory, i.e., general relativity, and are inconsistent with quantum field theory. In quantum field theory, the quantum of gravitational field energy is the graviton, and the quantum of anti-gravitational field energy is the antigraviton. If they exist, they are zero rest mass quanta, which travel at the speed of light and have an infinite range of action, as do photons and neutrinos. Okay? So, and then he just kind of goes through some discussion. Let me just take a breather for folks. See if folks have any other questions. We got a lot of random questions too. So, yikes. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention about negative gravity. So so you have photons, which are units of light, but there are also particles theorized called phonons, which are particles of vibration, like vibrational energy. And phonons, in fact, Dr. Sean Patrick, his dissertation is on something related to phonons. And phonons are said to, exhibit the properties of having negative mass, i.e., could be, negative gravity, right? So, there's something out there that could be related to that. So, let's see. I'm like going all the way. Well, there's a lot of comments here. So, good Lord. Okay. All right. Tons of UFOs in Puerto Rico. Huh. Let's see. Fast Mama Jama. How do you know that the Puerto Rican UFOs run on hydrogen? I mean, it would make sense if they're dipping in it out of water, but let's see. Yeah, actually, I'm going to Catalina sometime next month. Anybody recommend a good IR camera that's less than $500 that I can record, things in the sky at night? If you can, just put it in the comments. In the comments, well, yeah, of this stream, and also in the in the regular comments too, because I have no sense of what works and what's good and what's not. Let's see. All right. By the way, if you're just joining us now, you're listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio, and we're discussing how UFOs work based on the scholarship of Paul Hill in his book Unconventional Flying Objects. It was published in 1995 posthumously, by the way, because he didn't want to, have it published during his lifetime. Let's see. Oh, I'm an independent consultant. I do financial consulting. I do this. I do a number of other things. I work at a local university at their business school as a course facilitator, and I do a bunch of different jobs. I was a CFO before I did all this stuff, but the corporate world went crazy, and I just don't want to. It's very difficult for people to convince me to go back to being a part of cultures that require you to walk on eggshells on just about everything. I'm not that kind of a person. I'm just going to tell you what I think. If what you're doing is stupid, I will say, let's not do this. And people get really upset and butthurt about that, and I just don't have the patience for. I am a Gen Xer. I do not have the patience for millennial eggshell walking. I just don't. I just don't. I can't. And I came from the military too, so I've had to tamp it down in the last 25 years or so since I've been out. But you can't be efficient when you have to walk on eggshells, and you can't. It's just entirely inefficient. I'm much more efficient on my own. So anyway, that's what I do now. Let's see. Man, there's a lot of comments. Good lord. I don't know if that's a comment of mine, but anyway. Wow. Kirk Lizard is part of the UFO. Yeah, look, he just has a job. He's doing his job. His job is to, you know, counterintelligence, clearly. So he's just doing counterintelligence. Oh, thank you, Soullight US expat. The Kona Blue episode. So I'm just going to read your comment for people on the radio. So I love the last Kona Blue episode. Let's see the video I shared on the upcoming. No, I didn't, but I wouldn't be surprised. Given what the we'll get into that in the kind of second half of um, this live stream. We'll talk about what's going on. I mean, the bottom line is that we have a lot of stupid people working in government right now, and they've taken actions that have basically accelerated the death of the dollar by just doing stupid things like seizing dollar denominated assets, just contrary to international law. And what that does is that undermines a system that's based on the dollar, because if the US can come in at any time and seize your assets just because they're denominated in dollars, you have no incentive to hold dollar assets, which is stupid. But we did that to the Russians, which was stupid. And by the way, they just stopped using, or massively reduced use of the dollar, started using like the yuan and a basket of other currencies. So we shot ourselves in the foot because some moron in the current administration was focused on 2 months ahead rather than 20 years ahead of time. So if there is a de-dollarization, it ain't going to be his fault. It's going to be this administration's fault because they sowed the seeds of stupidity. Anyway, we'll get into that. And again, this is not Democrat or Republican. I'm sure Trump would probably exacerbate it, whatever it is. But I just look at the results of policies, and if they indicate gross incompetence, I'm going to call it out as gross incompetence. So let's see. Yeah, it is. It certainly is. Because at the same time that we did this, so the comment here is Russia's economy is roaring now. At the same time, we decided to shoot ourselves in the foot. We shot ourselves in the foot again by not only reducing the strategic petroleum reserve, which is only supposed to be reduced during periods of uncertainty, but also we put restrictions on drilling and things like that in the United States. And as a result, you lower the kind of the oil supply, gas prices rise, and Russians have a predominantly oil and gas economy, so they benefit. Really stupid, total lack of foresight, but hey, we're rolling with it. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that dire, because the thing is, even a basket of currencies is still not going to be as good as the dollar. I mean, you want to hold Chinese yuan, really? The guys who constantly change the rules the moment they're in charge of something? Yeah, no, no. Let's see. They are finding base metal alloy to replace palladium and platinum. That is why the price drops. Who's Walter Bosley? So, like, if you just put just a quick description there, I mean, I could obviously do an internet search, but I don't want to do it while I'm talking to everybody on the radio. Okay, I want to get back to move away from rants of incompetence, and I'm going to get back to the Paul Hill material, and then I'll try to cut it off in about 25 minutes or so, and then we can talk about some of the stuff that I briefly touched on and ranted on, because I don't like to see incompetence, especially with a country that I love. But I'm just so frustrated because we just don't. Our political system doesn't select for competent people; it selects for litigious people and corrupt people, and we're just reaping. We are in the fourth turning. If you've all read like Strauss and I don't know the other guy's name, but we're in the fourth turning, which is a time of crisis. So it's just going to be stupid for a while, and until things are until the pain is kind of reaches a. I mean, as an example, like I live in California, and these idiots passed a $20 per like minimum wage for restaurant workers. So as a result, all these restaurants are either going bankrupt or leaving the state, and it's just like you idiots could like it was obvious that was going to happen. Why were you that stupid? Anyway, and we're doing the same thing with electric vehicles. The governor mandated that we have to. I can't I, I I can't handle it. I can't handle it anymore. Mandated that you could only like they could only be sold in California in 2030. So they're a huge drain on the grid, right? Whereas your internal combustion engine car is not, right? And we're already having rolling blackouts in the summer because these morons are not building new generating capacity. In fact, they're closing it down. They're closing down hydroelectric plants, which are clean, right? But all the salmon, oh, the salmon. So, screw humans, right? So they're shutting that down. They're also shutting down nuclear power plants, which are the cleanest, right? If you really care about global warming, right? Zero emissions, right? But they're closing those and they're not building any new plants, and then they're having all these requirements. Then you also have you have artificial intelligence, which are huge energy hogs, right? So, because the chips that run them by NVIDIA, like you just have to buy lots of them. You have huge server farms. Cryptocurrency, same thing. So you're going to have within 18 months, we're going to have a major energy crisis, right? Are you hearing about that in the news? Are you hearing about any of that? No, no. The morons who are running our government are just, I'm gonna buy more stocks. I'm gonna buy because I can legally inside trade freaking Congress, right? Like, how about why don't they just make that illegal? Why don't they just make a rule that says they can't do that? Why? It's well known, right? Like, people are getting like wealthy off this crap. They're so corrupt. Anyway, I gotta calm down. Here we go. So Walter Bosley is a retired USAF OSI agent who researches and writes about historical, mysterious, and strange occult. Interesting murder mysteries. He follows the popular UFO chatter too and gets interesting. Yeah, you got to be careful with those guys though, because they are like trained disinformation agents. Anybody from the Air Force Office of Special. Interesting. He's friends with Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. I reached out to Dr. Farrell and no response. So yeah, but that's the thing. It can be as cheap as you want, but your power bill is going to be through the roof. And, it's going to bankrupt people because it's going to be so high. Interesting. Yeah, but I'd buy MG in any gravity craft in a heartbeat. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, buying solar panels. I mean, I should own some, but I don't. But people should probably prepare because it's gonna get stupid because these people running things are just not thinking ahead. I mean, the moment that well, we'll get into this. I gotta. I'm getting distracted from my own stuff. Okay, going back to some of the discussion. Okay, so we already know that like a mechanical process, these craft are not right because you would see kind of these mechanical devices, and then anyway, okay, so they clearly have like this observed tilt um, that's required by a repulsive force field propulsion, not up as would be required for aerodynamic lift, right? And then the UFO acceleration forces are too high to be accounted for by aerodynamic forces. So airflow, all that stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Rocketry, I don't think we really need to go into it. It is highly unlikely, let's just say. All right, so high speed particle propulsion. So high speed particle propulsion um, is pretty much not a possibility except for neutrinos, but they're not propelled by the ejection of high speed particles in the ordinary sense of the phrase. And for one thing, um, they would leave the ground uh, with traces of radioactivity, and that doesn't usually happen. Let's see. Now, the only exception is that in quantum field theory, fields may be considered to consist of particle-like field quanta, antigravitons, for example, and only in the sense is it proper to think. Only in that sense is it proper to think of these UFOs being uh, propelled by particles. So it'd be virtual particles, I think, is what he's saying. All right. So friction, yeah, no. Force fields. So we'll go into a little bit about that um, a little bit later. So I think if you kind of go through all this evidence of propulsion, I think what you're going to kind of quickly narrow yourself down to is that these things have some sort of force field propulsion, whatever it is. Okay, so I'm just going to read, one or two cases. I'm just going to read them directly from the book, just to give folks a flavor for what we mean, some evidence of what might be kind of direct field propulsion. Just give me a. So, okay, I'm reading this from page 98 from Paul Hill's book. Mr. Raider Salveson of Norway was driving his car on the main road to Jæren at 4 p.m. on October 28th, 1970. It was twilight time, and he had just turned on his headlights when he was blinded by the approach of a bright light. He stopped the car, and the following account is taken from the APRO Bulletin, January-February 1971. He opened the car door to have a look and saw a bright ball of fire which slowly drifted toward the car and stopped. Salveson then got out of his car, whereupon the light was gone, but a dish-shaped object was hovering above his car. He estimated its altitude to be about 10 meters. All around the circumference was a belt that shimmered a yellow color, but the material of the object was steel blue in color. Suddenly, with no warning, Salveson was knocked to the ground. He felt no pain and held out his right hand to break his fall. At the same instant, he heard the sound of breaking glass. Rising to his feet, he noticed that the object was leaving at a high rate of speed, and then the pulverized windshield of his car was inside as if a blow from without had broken it. Okay, so here's just a comment from the author. Salveson's story hangs together and will be shown to be very important to UFO theory. That the UFO force field knocked him down and the windshield inward as it took off, probably with a slight tilt and a sudden increase in thrust, is fairly obvious. Okay. So we'll get back to that. So here's another example. Let me just make sure. Okay. So this is, I'll read a second example and then we'll kind of skip ahead. All right. So there have been several accounts of tree branches bending down beneath slow moving, low flying UFOs. The following account of branches being broken off will serve as an example. So this is Lorenzen UFO, the whole story, 90. Okay. Private Jerome Scanlon was stationed at a Nike base in Maryland. So Nikes are these missile stations that they used to have. There used to be a Nike base near where I live, kind of off in, kind of in the approach to San Francisco, in terms of the San Francisco Bay. Okay, so it's 17 miles from Washington, D.C. at 5:30 a.m. on September 29th, 1958. He was walking from the sentry post to his barracks to sound reveille when he heard a humming noise above him. Looking up, he saw an object shaped like a bullet with a tapered aft end, but truncated to form a blunt base. That is, it looked like what is commonly called a streamlined or boat-tailed bullet. It was about the size of a medium-sized plane and was moving slowly away from him at about 300 feet altitude and making about 30 miles per hour. He said it moved over trees, breaking branches in its path. Exhaust flames issued from the rear, and its luminous green skin lit up the surrounding terrain with a weird glow. It came in for a landing about a mile and a half away. Scanlon encountered a friend, Riney Ferris, who had also seen the object shortly after Scanlon did. Together, they went and inspected the traversed area where the object had landed. In addition to the path of broken branches, they found a half-mile strip of scorched earth and vegetation as evidence. Okay, and this is just a note. There's an optimum UFO speed for maximizing the bending and breaking of tree branches, depending on the diameter of the UFO force field and the natural period of swaying of the tree branches. If one bends a tree branch down and lets it go, it swings up in about half its natural period. Assuming the UFO is low and the diameter of the force field is about the same as the UFO, maximum bending occurs at the speed at which the UFO moves one diameter in the time for one swing of the branch, or what is the same thing in half its natural period of vibration. If the object were 45 feet long, used instead of diameter, and the branch's half period of vibration was about 1 second, then the speed for maximum bending and breaking would be 30 miles per hour as observed, because 30 miles per hour is a movement of 45 feet in 1 second. This relationship gives approximately what in engineering is called a sudden load, whose deflection is twice the steady load value that would apply if the UFO were stopped or barely moving it. At higher speeds than that described, the branch hasn't had time to achieve its maximum bending before the load is relieved by the UFO passing. Okay? All right, so I'm going to skip the next. There's a bunch of cases. So there is an example of a UFO parting tree branches without touching. There's an example of a UFO knocking a truck over. There's an example of a UFO touching or bumping a pickup truck. There's another example where a saucer rocks a car. There's an example where a saucer dislodges roof tiles, and you'll understand when I get to it later on. And there's a example of what he calls a rock throwing experiment. I'm not going to get into that. Okay. Okay, so he has something he calls the UFO game, right? So we talked about all these cases. Okay. Let's see. And I'm just going to take the first two, but he does a bunch of them. So there are about 8 cases that we talked about. Okay. And there's kind of 3 different forces that we're looking at, right? There's the electric force, the magnetic force field, and the repulsive force field, which could include gravity or could include some other medium. Okay. So let's look at the first 2 cases because he asked a few questions. Okay. So in the first example, on what object does the action take effect? All right. So on the Norwegian, he was knocked down. So the second question was, could an electric field knock him down? Well, no, because standing on the ground he carried no electrical charge. So there was no electrical charge that could be acted upon. Second, third question is, could a moving magnetic field do it? So the answer is conceivably, but the high eddy currents in his body necessary to produce the force, he probably would have been stunned. Doesn't fit well in this example. And then the third question is, could a repulsive force field knock him down? Yes, because it propels all matter. And that's why, so again, why wasn't he hurt? Because the field pushes every cell in his body and is scarcely felt if the body is free to move. So it's like a soft push. So we go to the second example, ask similar questions. Okay, so in what object did the field, actually, I think it's the same case, but we're talking about the windshield. On what object did the field action take place? On the windshield. It collapsed inward. Could an electric field collapse it? No. A glass windshield cannot carry an appreciable electric charge. Could a magnetic field collapse it? Absolutely not. Magnetic fields affect magnetically susceptible materials and conductors. Glass is neither. This test couldn't be more definitive if performed in a laboratory with a captive UFO. Could a repulsive force do it? Yes, if strong or sudden or both. The windshield is supported around the edges, but not elsewhere. And a sudden push could shatter it. Okay, then we talked about the tree branches, right? On what did force field act? Well, tree branches, right? Could electric field do that? Not a chance. Could a magnetic field break them? Probably not. A stationary magnetic field would, of course, do nothing. For a moving magnetic field, the shape of the tree branches is poor for setting up eddy currents. If the magnetic field cycled at the frequency of a saucer hum, the result could be no greater than a high frequency shaking of the tree leaves, if that. Could a repulsive force field break them? Yes, particularly because the UFO moves slowly, as already explained. If a UFO has a weight per unit platform area of 100 pounds per square foot or more, they should bend the branches and break a few. Okay, so he goes through all these other cases, and what he does is he just sets up a little matrix, right? So in all these other cases, the electric field is ruled out in all 8. Okay, in the cases, there 50% of the cases it's ruled out, but there are cases where something that has magnetic materials in it, so like a truck tipping over, a car rocking, a truck being bumped, things like that, it's possible there's a magnetic field operating. But in every single one of the cases where there's interaction on matter, 100% would fit the case of this repulsive force. Okay, so that's kind of where we kind of get in that sort of example. Now, there's plenty of other things that I can kind of focus on in this, but I think that's kind of enough to give people a sense of what likely could be conveying these craft. Let's see. All right, I have like a billion comments I want to go through, so just bear with me. Okay. Just going to rapidly cycle through this. Yeah, I'm afraid to even ask that. Our son's soul is giving birth to a new world. I can't say exactly when, but possible in our lifetimes. I hope not. It's actually scary. All right, so Roger Claiborne is, most corrupt politicians are not smart enough to realize the people corrupting them are lying to them about what they are doing or why they are doing what they are doing. And it's all about, we might have some of it. I don't think we have all of it. Like this materialization, dematerializing. Steve Mera has done experiments, but you get into the occult, like you get into like seances and stuff like that. But he's run experiments where they've contacted non-human intelligences, and they've been able to materialize and dematerialize physical objects. During, he's been in the room where he could pass his hand through a cup, and then a disembodied voice would say, "Okay, now pick it up," and then it would rematerialize. So I don't pretend to know if this is spiritual, if it's some version of quantum mechanics. There's some non-physical entity that can manipulate or use the laws of quantum mechanics at a very advanced level to speed up vibration to make something solid, or to slow down vibration to make. And I could have gotten those reversed. I'm, not haven't spent a ton of time studying quantum mechanics, but I think some of that stuff can be replicated. It's just, do we understand what the technology is? Yeah, that's for sure. They're definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think every single discipline needs to be involved in understanding the nature of reality. I think we've relied too heavily on physics. Yeah. By the way, there are like I knew somebody like recently, like in the last 3 years, who was building a well in Utah, and the guy who came to dig the well, they used dowsers. Like it's still used today because it's like a superstition. But I don't know if I think it probably actually works. But it might be something related to the electric field in your body, or which is very minute. But those small perturbations, and if you're holding a dowsing rod that somehow detects the water, I mean, there's very likely a science behind all this stuff, but people just dismiss it because it's too complicated. Yeah, it could be hydrogen, right? Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff. Like the Casimir effect operates off of 0 point energy, right? They can't really explain it. Yeah, Washington's a beautiful state. It just rains, almost rains as much as it does in Massachusetts. All right, just bear with me. I'm trying to get there. I'm like way behind on comments here, guys. Okay. Anyway, as I'm going through comments, I'm going to stop there with the UFO propulsion stuff, and then I'm going to start talking about just recent geopolitical events. I'm going to do some predictions because I think some of the stuff I see is pretty obvious, but no one else appears to see it. Let's see. All right, so Dave Scott has been about to see UFOs by focusing on compassion along with a patch of sky. Okay. Yeah, that's possible. I mean, I don't know of any specific cases, but I would not be surprised. Yeah, could be. No, no, that's just stuff that just seems obvious. I mean, but is not obvious to the ruling elite. Okay. Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is in the news recently. There were, yeah, it could be related to this. There was an SF colonel. I talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the broadcast. In the last few days, confronted a Chechen that was had a telephoto lens and was taking pictures of his children. Okay, and a altercation ensued, and the special forces colonel shot him, as one does when some creepy, potentially foreign agent is taking pictures of your children with a telephoto lens outside of Fort Bragg. Oh, it's called Fort Liberty now because the the powers that be are 1984 in all of our language. Yeah, the Deagle report, that's some scary stuff. It's like 2025. 3/4 of the global population, goes away. The future forecasting group, I talked to Daz Smith recently, and he'll be on the radio show on the 23rd. But he saw some nuclear stuff. But I also talked to Christopher Robinson, who spent 30 years as a precognitive dreamer helping out MI5 and MI6 foil IRA plots. He saw the Lockerbie bombing. He recorded it. He warned the U.S. 2 years before 9/11 happened. The U.S., of course, ignored him. So he did a group of experiments called the GOD, the God experiments in Arizona, and got like a perfect score. Chris Mellon told him personally that he had never seen anybody on the U.S. side that accurate. He saw October 7th, the events of October 7th in Israel. He had a precognitive dream in September 11th, 2023, before it happened. And so I can, in 2015 or so, or at least at the time that, and again, you'll be able to watch the whole episode. I'll reveal it because you guys are listening here live, so I got no problem telling you. And actually, there's a short that's out already. So in 2015 or so, right around when Trump said he was going to be running, he had a precognitive dream, and the precognitive dream says, because he just asked, sometimes you can just go to sleep and ask his dreams. And the answer he got was he will get 2 terms. So when Trump lost in the last election, he was disappointed, not because Trump won or lost. He's a Brit. He doesn't care. He has no opinion on who wins or loses. But he was disappointed because he thought his dream was wrong. And I don't think his dream was wrong. I think it's an indicator that Trump will likely be the next. Will have a second term. It doesn't say he's going to win the election, by the way. So I'm not trying to throw in some shade in there, but it doesn't say that he wins the election. It says he gets a second term, whatever that means. So it was very, very specific. And again, I'm not going to get into whether or not that's positive or negative. This is not a political channel, and I don't want to alienate anybody on either side. But that's kind of where he says. He also sees kind of a shutdown of the Suez Canal. One can argue that that's already kind of happened with the Houthi, and maybe that crisis has passed. But there was something that Frank Milburn posted on Twitter in the last few days, where the Russians are actively trying to get like submarine basing rights in the Red Sea in Sudan. So there's some weird stuff. The other thing too is the immigrant crisis that we currently have, us and the Europeans. There is a thesis that those both are being funded by, in Europe, likely by Russia, in China, likely, or not China, but in the U.S., could be China, could be Russia. I don't know. But this whole Chechen thing that happened with this SF colonel, my thesis, and again, I know nothing else about the case, but my thesis would be he was an SF colonel. Chances are he probably spent some time in Poland or in Ukraine training the Ukrainian army. The Russians found out who he was. And then since our border is so porous in the south, they probably have these teams inserted throughout the United States, and they're taking a surgical approach and actively surveilling people in the U.S. who participated on the Ukrainian side. And it's really frustrating because the southern border problem is very easy to solve. It's actually simple. But I don't think we've had anybody in the history of the country, aside from maybe William Tecumseh Sherman, who did the March to the Sea during the Civil War, who has the stomach to do what's necessary. I mean, but it's a very simple solution. You just mine the southern border, and then the first people who get maimed trying to traverse the minefields, um, I mean, it'll stop. It'll stop overnight, except for maybe the hardest core military, men of military age who are infiltrators, basically. So, but we're not doing that. We have no political will on either side, right? On the Democratic side, everybody's worried about being called a racist. On the Republican side, it makes the Democrats look utterly incompetent, so it's great politically for them. Either way, their incentives are utterly misaligned, and they're completely derelict. It's a complete and utter dereliction of duty on both sides. They're not protecting Americans. We're sending billions to a country 6,000 miles away, but we're not protecting our own people or our own borders. So I think after the election, you're going to have a ton of civil unrest because, and once these people are cut off the dole, they're going to be a source of instability. And it just is what it is. You're also going to have saboteurs from Russia and China that are ready to activate in the case of a further increase in tensions. At the same time, in February 2022, we should have begun reindustrializing. Like, we don't have the same industrialized base that we did during World War II. So, we should have immediately been doing that. And, the Ukrainians now are complaining they're not getting enough ammunition. Well, they're not getting enough ammunition, not because we're not giving them enough ammunition. They're not getting enough ammunition because it's being diverted to Israel. And it's also, we're running out because we don't have the industrial base to cover it. There's also been unreported or scarcely reported ammunition fires inside the United States, right, at various ammunition plants. Not broadly reported, but they're there. You can find them. So my guess would be institutions of saboteurs and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it is extreme. 100%, it's extreme. But it's one of those things that one or two people get maimed and it'll stop, right? But again, I said nobody has the stomach to do it. But we're at the point where extreme measures are needed. Otherwise, but I think we're in for a really difficult 3 to 5 years. Even the inflation problem, right? So, like, if you look at the banking system, it is really vulnerable right now because we raised interest rates from like 0% to 5% overnight. And in the banking business, you have to lend, you have to lend out debt to various people at a certain interest rate, and then you make your money on the difference. But what ends up happening is if you borrow money from the government and then lend it out, right, you have like a huge portfolio of extremely low interest debt, but now you got to pay the government 5%, so you're upside down. And as a result, like, the longer this stretches, the more dangerous get. At the same time, you have a commercial debt problem, right? Because with the pandemic, people don't want to go in to work anymore, right? Because you don't really need to in many, there's a tremendous waste of time and resources that people were doing for no good reason, right? So as a result, people aren't renting commercial spaces anymore. So a lot of these corporations are just losing money. They're also not seeking out these empty properties and things like that. And then at the same time, you have these moronic politicians passing stupid laws like the minimum wage for restaurant employees, which are causing like mom and pop shops to just not be able to run a business anymore because it just doesn't, they're underwater. So they're going bankrupt. So there's just all of this stuff is imminently manageable, but at every turn, the people who run things are just making political moronic decisions instead of thinking through what needs to be done and having like an intelligent industrial policy. So in February of 2022, if you asked me how the US military would do against the Russians, I would have said that we would run through them like shit through a goose. And that would have been an accurate statement. Now, they've had 2 years of high intensity conflict under their belt. By some estimates, they have about 575,000 troops in reserve just waiting for either NATO to attack, which we won't, or to begin a massive counteroffensive. And if I were Putin, the calculus is going to be I need to end this war by November, before the election happens. And, I think both candidates are utterly incompetent. But with Biden, that's the devil that Putin knows. With Trump, Trump is all over the place. He's all over the place, which is not good for U.S. foreign policy, but it's also not good if you're trying to plan against U.S. foreign policy because he's a complete wild card. He's like, if you've ever read the Foundation series, he's the mule. So I think what Putin's trying to do is he kind of sees what the tea leaves are. So he's going to push his forces to the Dnipro River as rapidly as possible. Because the Ukrainian people, I mean, they're just the men have been decimated, and it's just a numbers game at the end of the day. But if the U.S. military in Europe had to face off against the Russians, the Air Force might do well, but the Army's not ready because the Army is based on kind of the old style of warfare. We're only beginning to use drones, maybe, and for all intents and purposes, the Russians have demonstrated that they can get a $400 drone, fly it to the back of an M1 tank, strap an RPG on it, and slam it into the heat vent. And look, I've been in an M1 tank. I know exactly where that heat vent is. And they have the technology to do that. So you render a $1.5 million tank, and granted, it's a 40-year-old tank design, obsolete. So what are we going to do? Right? We're just not, I think the U.S. way of war is going to be to leap ahead. And most of what we have in the battlefield is going to be some form of drone, even like unmanned ground vehicles and things like that. But we're just not there yet. So I think if we faced off against the Russians in Europe, we would take massive casualties and we'd have to go to a draft. And I don't know about you, but I'm not fighting for these corrupt clowns. Nope, no fucking way. And neither is my kid. And I think you're at a time when the moneyed elite and the politicians, the left never wants to fight in war and things like that. And that is what it is. But they've so alienated people on the right that they won't either. And that's where they get their warrior class. That's where the warrior class is based. And people like me and people who have served overseas are not urging their children to serve. And for good reason. These people will just spend your life like it's nothing. So we have to get over that. And the only way we get over that is through a normal democratic process where we replace everybody. Everybody. There's not a single politician in Congress, maybe with the exception of Burkett, right, from Tennessee. I think that man is salt of the earth. I think he's good. I think the rest of them, like they're in it to enrich themselves, and they don't really care about you, me, or anybody else. So until we get out of that issue, and they set us up for a really difficult time. And the Chinese just ran a 2-day exercise encircling Taiwan, so they're preparing. I think they disengaged and went back to their own bases, but it's only a matter of time before they decide to roll the dice. And I don't know. I'm not optimistic in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm still keeping, again, I'm not offering money advice or anything like that, but I generally don't churn a lot in the stock market, but any new money that I put in my kind of stock accounts is sitting in cash right now. I still have money in the market, all that stuff. I'm not selling, but I'm not buying either. I'm waiting for reality to catch up with fundamentals. And when that happens, I'll probably start buying again. But anyway, I just I don't know about World War III. So again, Christopher Robinson says he doesn't see it on the horizon yet. So yeah, I mean, what else are you going to invest in, right? Are you going to invest in the yuan, really? Where the Chinese can just say, it's not anything, capital controls, yeah, everything that's outside, they can just play games with you. Well, so could we. That's why there's this de-dollarization process that's been heightened because we were playing games with people. We were playing games with the Russians. So it's not smart. But let's see. I bet you I missed a bunch of things. I really hope not. I hope the Korean Peninsula thing doesn't happen. There's no good reason for it to happen, right? Um, let's see what's about that. I hope it doesn't go to the Rhine River, but if the Russians get to the Dnipro, there's, I mean, the Poles can be a pretty good speed bump, but the Germans won't stop them. They just don't have the. I mean, we would have to send troops, and we would have issues, and then they'd have to go to a draft, and good luck with that, because we've had incompetent leaders who've put us in this situation. Like at every turn, they do the wrong thing. Every turn, and it's been really frustrating for me to watch because I don't know if you folks have looked at my background or anything, but my thesis advisor became Obama's Secretary of Defense. So like I know how to think through these problems. And I'm on the sidelines. I just watch this idiocy over and over and over again. And I mean, we had a Secretary of Defense who was just missing for a week. And he's so incompetent that nobody noticed. It's just we have so many 95% of our problems are self-inflicted. And it is as a patriotic American, it is very difficult for me to watch because this stuff is not rocket science. It's just not. It's just people are afraid. They're afraid to say things. They're afraid to speak their mind. And maybe I'm not. And I've gotten into trouble with it in the past, but I can't allow stupidity to go on all around me. But I think 5 years from now, you're going to have entirely different people running the government. I mean, for goodness sake, we we bioengineered a pathogen, right? The NIH funded EcoHealth. EcoHealth funded the development of a pathogen at the Wuhan Institute of Technology that leaked and killed 7 million people worldwide. And they tried to blame it on, well, a bat bit a penguin, and then a penguin was eaten at a wet market that just happened to be right across the river from the Wuhan Institute of Technology. And then it suddenly broke out. And then the cure was worse than the disease. 500,000 Americans, by some estimates, have died because of it. I'm not going to go too much into it. But and the fact that these people are still walking around, no accountability whatsoever. None. Fauci's just enjoying his retirement. Everything is fine. Everyone is doing well. Like, it boggles my mind. There should be a commission on this thing, right? And they should figure out how the hell that happened. Why are you doing gain of function research when it's absolutely 100% illegal? It is illegal to do that stuff. So the cancer rates are through the roof. There's all sorts of stuff, and people were forced to take the damn thing. So I'm just going to try to calm myself down. But we are living in as one of my friends says, we are living on a dark planet. There's some dark stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And this is what happens in a fourth turning, where we go through a crisis and then the world will be remade afterward. And that's the last time we had a fourth turning was World War II. The entire structure of the international order was overturned and we went into a new world. In terms of the generations participating in this, millennials are going to lead, after this crisis, but Gen X is going to lead during the crisis. And right now they're not. It's all about, kind of the baby boomers still have their death grip, and it shows. They're just making all sorts of unforced errors. And it is really frustrating for me to watch. It is absolutely mind boggling to me how, just at the sheer level of incompetence. Anyway, sorry for the rant, guys. And I'm not trying to be Mr. Doom, Dr. Doom, right? I think we're going to be fine coming out of this, and we're going to be better off coming out of this. Let's see. Well, if civilization collapses, gold's not going to do anything for you. The only thing that's going to do anything for you is, do you have personal protection and do you know how to use it? It's even more important than food. Like gold, what are you going to do, right? If you kind of walk gold around and somebody points a gun at you, they got your gold. There's nothing you can do about it. So I don't think we're going to be in that sort of world, and I don't think nuclear weapons are going to be used. Yeah. I don't think Putin has any interest in starting using nuclear weapons. No, it's people who are trying to make a buck. I think. I mean, some of it's religious nuts, but I think 90% of it is just greed. I think it's greed, and I think it's arrogance. And those people are going to fall. It's going to, and we're watching it in real time. Oh my God, you're raising the word prions. Oh my God. Oh God. Well, that was one of the side effects. Apparently, they found a woman with prions in her brain who took the V stuff. Like what? Oh, I think Putin's the only person in this whole process that's predictable, right? I mean, he's not a good man. He doesn't care about humanity, but he's very strategic, and all you got to do is think, if I were Putin, what would I do? And you come up with the same answer. He's just very logical and rational. And like I said, his next move is just going to race to the Dnipro and then end the war. And I think that's it. And then he's going to, try to consolidate what he has and move forward. That's the end game. But yeah, I hope not. Good Lord, I hope not. Yeah, I don't, and yeah. So what we did in Wuhan was a level of stupid I never thought. Yeah, I 100% agree. There's a part of me that thinks it was done on purpose, but that part of me is like 0.01%. I just think we just have people who are utterly incompetent in charge. I think it's just that simple. Yeah, but they've always been working on super soldiers. I don't. Oh yeah, I don't even think I read your comment as was written, Philip. I think I read it exactly like you intended. Yeah, I'm not using the V word, but I agree. It's just insane. I'm afraid to go to a doctor to find out like what damage it did. Yeah, Bashar. Yeah, the channeler Bashar. Yeah, I haven't had a channeler on because I'm not sure what I think of that stuff. I mean, I think there's something to it, but I'm not sure if it's like good or bad because they essentially let some entity come over and take them over and speak using their body and things like that. And as someone who's raised Catholic, that's called demonic possession. And I'm not saying that's what channeling is, but that's always going to be at the edge of my perception on what that could be. Okay. I mean, what else geopolitically? Uh, Rare earth metals. China has suddenly a monopoly again, right? So good luck getting your tantalum and for your iPhones and things like that. It's just So much stupidity. Yeah. Yeah, it just seems to all be converging into like something in 2025. I almost think that that three quarters of the population kind of going away. I half think it's side effects from the V word, and just a lot of people are just going to die from cancers and things like that. That might be what it is. Because Lynn Buchanan's based, it was man-made natural disasters is how he framed it. But he talked about weather weapons and earthquake weapons and things like that. But an unintentional bioweapon. And I don't know how people will react to governments that try to impose order after a debacle like that. I don't know, because you start seeing all your friends and relatives like die decades earlier than they otherwise would have. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but and they're already talking about some H1N1 variant, and just like I, I just don't trust them anymore. I don't, and that might end up harming people because there might be something like a legitimate uh, pathogen that comes out that people are like, no, I don't trust them. I'm not going to do this, and because their credibility is completely shot, it might end up killing more people than it otherwise would have. So this day and age, you have to use a ton of discernment. Like you have to really do your homework. And I knew when I took that jab, I was taking a calculated risk, but my workplace required it. So I'm like, well, the powers that be say it's good. So I know it's an untested thing. Let's just hope for the best. And the lymph nodes under my arms swelled like balloons. I don't get sick. I haven't been to a doctor in 20 some years because I don't get sick. I don't get hurt. I have a really strong immune system. I never had a reaction to that to anything in my entire life. So, and it went away and all that good stuff, but I don't trust these people anymore. Yeah, we have people doing what they're doing. Yeah, that's the other thing too. You need to have a good mindset, right? I'm like here spinning up a lot of negative energy. It's all going to be okay. We're all going to survive. The human species has confronted far worse things than this in the past, like the Black Death and things like that. The source of my animus is just governmental and leader incompetence. That's why I get really frustrated. We're going to be fine. You are the source of solving your own problems. Always start with yourself. No one is coming to save you. You are here to save yourself. So rely on friends and family, rely on your close networks, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, and you will be fine. Okay. But if you're relying on some third party you don't know to come and save you, remember the famous uh, Benjamin Franklin aphorism: God helps those who help themselves. So we're gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be okay. I don't like spinning. I'm just really frustrated, and I'm getting my aggro out tonight because I don't have a guest, and I can just kind of get my aggro out. But well, they were forced to. Like it's not like they wanted. Like a lot of these people wanted to, right? It was because like they were like their employers told them you have to take this thing or you're fired. That's what makes it wrong. Like if they kind of gave you a choice, I get it. But yeah, yeah, and we are printing endless money, which that musical chairs is not great. Interesting. Thank you, Philip, for sharing that. Yeah, mad cow disease, y'all. Mad cow disease, y'all. No, if you have polluted infected meat, you can get it from cattle from eating beef. Yeah, it is what it is. It's already done. So you're just gonna have to live with it if you did it or not. Yeah, I had a job that, and I actually spoke out because I was on the management team of that company. I actually spoke out in favor of people like having a choice, and I was just outvoted. Fear does that to people. It makes them really like dark individuals. Yeah, same with automatic writing. Oh wow, you unzip your body and they slide right in. Hoodoo position. Look up this talk at Oregon State University. Thank you for sharing, Phil. That sounds really creepy. That sounds super creepy. Yeah, after that, that's the last one. I mean, if it's like not an mRNA, like if it's something that's worked for decades in the past, I'm okay with that, right? I'm not an advocate of like, people. I mean, we don't force people to get the smallpox vaccine anymore, but if there was an outbreak, well, it's actually a very, very ugly vaccine. Like people, actually has a mortality rate, but there's some standard vaccines. It's just when they like combine multiple vaccines right now with kids, it's a little. I'd rather just get one booster for something, let the body react to it, get another booster for something else. It's just these like combo shots that overwhelm a child's immune system that I don't agree with. Oh God. Yeah, and they're like starting to market this kind of crap. RFID people. It's like, oh yeah, I can scan my arm and I can go and like access my bank account and everything's great and it's just wonderful. Like, are you kidding me to track where? I mean, they're already doing it on your iPhone, but it's so scary. Yeah, yeah, the prions are the perfect depopulation weapon. Okay, so yeah, they are. They get their degrees and then they think they're God on earth and they're often wrong. Colloidal silver. I'll have to look into that. Well, I'm not going to say the I word, the ectin thing, but apparently it's like a wonder drug. Even though the media are just like, oh, horse dewormer. Ah. Huh. I think I have heard of John Campbell, but I I can't say too much about this thing because I don't want to get my account cut off. If you know what I mean. I don't think anybody knows what's going on in the world. I think we all have different perspectives, but unless you're like, I'm half joking, but I would have no idea unless you're some sort of like hybrid, like that has access to things I don't. Um, but you could. I don't know. I have no idea. And that's the approach I take to this channel. Like people are going to make wild claims, but sometimes those wild claims are true, right? There are people who are making wild claims about or even not so wild claims, and they were called racists and this and that, and they turned out to be right. So yeah, maybe. How do you know, Roger? Though, like, how do you know? I believe that. There's too much going on in my head, though. Like, it's very hard to quiet my mind. I've tried it, believe me. But um, yeah, I tell folks about a dream I had too. Wow, it's 8:05 already. I was worried. I'm like, do I have enough to talk about tonight? Oh my god, we have like 5 minutes from the end. Yeah, I might as well kind of missed the bottom of the hour, but you are listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio. And we talked initially about how UFOs work, leveraging the work of Paul Hill. And we just went through a whole rant on geopolitics and global elites and what a great job they're doing right now. What a stellar job. That's obviously delivered with very heavy sarcasm. Well, I'm not going to use the CW word, but as soon as the election's over and they start cutting the support for all these people, there will be violence. There 100% will be violence as people like the level of crime will skyrocket, and we've already created a system where like the police aren't allowed to do anything. So we won't be able to protect ourselves either unless, well, I mean, you have to protect yourself. You can't really rely on the police to get there in time, but you never really could. But I think there'll be a rise in home invasions. There'll be a rise in squatters. There'll be a rise in theft. There'll be all sorts of things. You can't just import 20 million people and expect things to be all hunky dory. So there'll be problems, and not that there's, and that's without somebody having any particular plan. It's just going to be social unrest. So, um, and then if Christopher Robinson is right and Trump wins, you're going to have like another summer of love like we did in 2020 with the BLM of violence. So it just is what it is. Maybe Trent, what people have no hope. Um, yeah, it's because he could trust authority when he grew up, right? But again, like I don't want to be super negative, right? It's just the next 3 to 5 years are going to be tough, and you just gotta just make it through. Just push on through, and the other side of it's going to be a better world. Just my opinion, just what my gut says. But this is a great unraveling, right? This is the fourth turning when all the modes running things are being exposed for all their faults and kind of what doesn't work anymore. Hey, how you doing, Area 51 with the Mars attack phase? You have entered the realm of the bipolar realm, where at once, every other second I'm talking about how corrupt and incompetent people who run things are, and on the other hand, I'm saying just calm down and everything will be fine and everything will be happy and shiny in 3 to 5 years. Yeah, there's no way I'm putting a chip in me. No way. Yeah, that's 100%. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat what you're saying on the radio, Roger, but I mean, the entire polity is being radicalized against that group, and it's obvious. But I'm not going to go into it because it's just Dr. Shiva. No, interesting. Yeah, well, they're only 9% of the global population, so wouldn't be hard, or maybe it would be hard. But yes, this is they live type. Yeah, right now. By the way, I have an episode with Jerry Marzinski, and he basically says the same voices, the same messages that the voices that schizophrenics hear are playing on legacy media. So it's like the same messages, the same program. Yeah, yeah. Oh wow, I did not know that. Unreal. Hmm. Well, thank you very much, Dennis. I appreciate it. I don't know how well this show it's going. I just at this point I'm just riffing, and I think I'm already over. But I got to get through the comments before I can drop. It, it might just be fine, right? Rick, remember 2000? It was supposed to be the end of the world. Like, let's not put too much negativity out in the universe, Solite, right? The world was supposed to fall apart in 2020, or sorry, in 2000. It was supposed to fall apart in 2012 with the end of the Bakun cycle, and it was all fine. Yes, that's right. I'm cold has it right. It's going to be a fun year. It's going to be interesting. We're going to live in a very interesting time. Yeah, I think the compliance uh, factor of the population is going to be much lower next time. Yeah, that concerns me too. Um, you will own nothing, you will eat bugs, and you will be happy. That's kind of that kind of yeah. Well, because they have money. Anybody who has money can do whatever they want in this country. That's the way it works. Yeah, They Live, one of my favorites, and it's turning out to be true. I am going to Catalina. So if folks, again, if they know of any good cameras with IR, so if I see anything in the sky, I can record it. Um, just put it in the comments. I'd be very interested in less than $500 though. I can't be spending crazy. Yep. Roddy Piper, who apparently is not around anymore. Yeah. All right, folks. I think I'm like way over. So I appreciate you all. And what's another one? TZ10 can be converted in 5 minutes. Yeah, they won't. They won't. So, by the way, uh, enjoy tomorrow. Remember, it's Memorial Day. I covered it in the live session on my channel, but enjoy your day. But also think about the folks who sacrificed their lives to keep us where we are, free thus far. And let's see. Huh. A clip on Fleer he put on his phone. I'll have to look into it. Wait. Who was in Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Roddy Piper was? Come on. I can't get off, Tessa, until you tell me who was awesome in all. Was Roddy Piper on an episode in all, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? What episode? I got to go back and rewatch it. I love that show because I grew up in Delaware, but it was like 20 minutes from Philadelphia. So like, just me. Well, yeah, Danny DeVito, of course, but I'm thinking like Roddy Piper. I know Danny DeVito's in it. Okay, Envision Optics PVS 14. Huh. And then I can take video from that. Well, I'll take a look at it. I'll definitely take a look at it. Roddy Piper. I'll look at. I'll look him up. I'll see if he's. I'll see what episodes he's on. It probably. Yeah. I'll check it out. I definitely need to watch that tonight. All right. Well, thank you all. It has been an absolute pleasure, and you'll see me next month, but I won't be live. It'll be a live stream, but and it's going to be exactly the same anyway. I just won't be responding to comments in real time. If I can, if I'm nearby and I can jump on and maybe answer some stuff while it's live. But my son's graduating, so we're from high school, and so we're going down and attending his graduation and all that stuff. So anyway, thank you, Soulite US expat. I appreciate you, and see everyone soon. You have a fantastic night, and click like and subscribe if you have not. Share it with your friends. It costs you nothing and helps the channel grow. So, what else we got? Yeah, definitely check it out. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and talk soon.